How much can you give me for it? The jeweler turned the engagement ring beneath a white inspection lamp while Lila Moreno stood on the other side of the counter, trying not to look at the clock. It was 3:42 on a Friday afternoon. Her landlord had given her until 5 to pay $900 or surrender the keys to the tiny apartment that was also her workshop. The jeweler examined the diamond, checked the gold band and shrugged. $400. Lila stared at him. The stone alone is worth more than that. Not on resale. Engagement rings lose value the moment the relationship does. A quiet voice came from behind her. I'll give you $1,200. Lila turned. A tall man stood near a display of antique watches. He looked about 38, dressed in a dark wool coat with rain on the shoulders. There was nothing flashy about him. No expensive watch, no security, no obvious reason he should be offering money for a stranger's ring. The jeweler frowned. This is a private appraisal. The man ignored him. Who engraved the band? He asked Lila. She instinctively closed her fingers around the ring. The outside was simple. The unusual part was hidden inside, a pattern of tiny leaves winding around a single star. Why? Because the carving was done by hand. Not a machine. You can tell? I can tell the artist changed direction twice near the setting because the gold was thinner there. Lila looked down. She had made those corrections herself at 2 in the morning, 3 years earlier, while her fiancé slept. The stranger continued. The diamond is ordinary. The engraving isn't. The jeweler pushed the ring back across the counter. Are you buying or giving a lecture? The man took out his wallet. $1,200, he repeated. Lila should have felt relieved. Instead, she felt exposed. I'm not accepting charity. It isn't charity. You don't know what it's worth. I know exactly what it's worth. His certainty irritated her. She had spent 4 years with a man who spoke as though confidence turned every opinion into fact. What are you going to do with it? She asked. Study it. That sounds strange. It probably is. The clock changed to 3:45. Lila thought of the eviction notice taped inside her coat pocket. She thought of the workbench in her apartment, the small torch, the engraving tools that had belonged to her mother and the unpaid invoices from clients who kept promising to send payment next week. Then she placed the ring on the counter. $1,200, she said. No bargaining after I leave. The stranger handed the money to the jeweler, who completed the transfer with visible annoyance. When it was done, the man placed the ring inside a plain gray box. Lila watched the lid close. She had expected selling it to hurt because it once represented a wedding. Instead, it hurt because it was the last piece of work she had made before she stopped believing she was an artist. What's your name? The stranger asked. That wasn't included in the price. Something almost like a smile touched his face. Fair enough. Lila took the money and left. At 4:31, she paid her rent. At 4:46, her landlord removed the eviction notice. At 5:03, she sat on the floor of her workshop apartment, surrounded by metal shavings and unpaid bills, wondering why the only person who had ever recognized her engraving was a stranger who had bought it from her. His name was Theo Ashford. Most people called him Theo. Lila learned that later. What she did not know was that Theo owned Ashford & Rowe, the largest privately held jewelry empire in the country. The company had 6,000 employees, stores in 28 countries and a history that appeared in glossy books displayed behind glass. Theo had grown up inside that history. His grandfather founded the company. His father expanded it. His mother quietly designed some of its most successful pieces and received almost no public credit because the Ashford name was considered more valuable than hers. Theo had taken control of the company 18 months earlier after his father's death. He had also inherited a problem. The company's newest collections were selling well, but its oldest records were filled with unnamed craftspeople, missing contracts and designs credited to executives who had never held an engraving tool. Theo had begun visiting small jewelry shops anonymously, looking for old pieces that might connect those missing names. That was why he had been standing behind Lila. It was not why he returned. 9 days later, Lila was repairing a broken silver locket at a weekend craft market when a familiar gray box appeared on her table. She looked up. The stranger from the jewelry shop stood in front of her. "You again. I need a repair. You bought something worth $1,200 and broke it in 9 days." "Not that." He opened the box. Inside was an antique bracelet with a damaged clasp. Lila lifted it carefully. The silver was dark with age. Tiny birds had been engraved along the edge, each one different. "This is beautiful. My grandmother wore it." "What happened?" "The clasp failed." She examined it through a magnifying lens. "It has been repaired badly at least 3 times. I was hoping for a less judgmental diagnosis. Metal remembers every bad decision." This time, he definitely smiled. "Can you fix it?" "Yes, but not today. The hinge needs to be rebuilt." "How long?" "A week." He glanced around the small market stall. Lila sold engraved bookmarks, repaired heirloom jewelry and displayed a few unfinished sketches that nobody ever asked about. "You made all of these?" "Most of them." "Why aren't they signed?" "They're bookmarks, not paintings." "That wasn't my question." Lila set the bracelet down. "You asked too many questions for someone who never gave me his name." "Theo." "Just Theo?" "You only gave me Lila." She narrowed her eyes. "How do you know my name?" "The repair card on your table." She looked down. "Lila Moreno, metal restoration and hand engraving." "Fine," she said. 1 week, Theo." He paid the deposit without asking for a discount. Before leaving, he glanced at an unfinished necklace design pinned behind her. It showed a crescent of gold broken by a line of tiny stars. "That pattern," he said. "Where did you learn it?" Lila followed his gaze. "My mother used to draw it." "Was she a jeweler?" "She engraved pieces for different companies. Nobody important." Theo looked at her more sharply than before. "What was her name?" Lila stiffened. "Is this part of the repair?" "No." "Then come back next Saturday." He left, but the question remained. The following week, Theo returned exactly at noon. Lila handed him the repaired bracelet. He tested the clasp. "You rebuilt the whole hinge." "The old metal was too weak." "It looks original." "That is the point of restoration." "No," Theo said quietly. "Most people make the repair visible so the customer notices the work." Lila met his eyes. "Good work doesn't need to interrupt the piece to prove it happened." For a moment, he said nothing. Then he placed the bracelet around his wrist. "My grandmother would have liked you." "You say that as if she disliked most people." "She had excellent judgment." Lila laughed before she could stop herself. Theo began returning to the market every Saturday. Sometimes he brought jewelry needing repair. Sometimes he brought coffee. Once, he brought nothing and claimed he had been walking nearby, although the nearest office district was almost a mile away. Lila did not ask what he did for a living. She assumed he worked with private collectors or antique dealers. He knew too much about gemstones to be ordinary, but he did not behave like the wealthy clients who treated craftspeople as invisible hands. He watched her work. He remembered that she took her coffee without sugar. He never touched a tool without permission. And when he disagreed with her, he did it directly. One Saturday, he examined a brooch she had restored. "You replaced the missing stone with glass." "The owner couldn't afford a sapphire." "You could have used synthetic sapphire." "She asked me to preserve her grandmother's brooch, not impress a jeweler." "It lowers the value." "It keeps the story." Theo looked at her for a long moment. "You think story matters more than value?" "I think people with money confuse price with value because price is easier to measure." He should have been offended. Instead, he returned the next week. Lila slowly told him about her former fiancé, Caleb Ross. Caleb had been a young jewelry designer with ambition, charm, and the ability to make every room feel like it was waiting for him. They met in a metalworking course. At first, he praised Lila's engraving. Then he began borrowing her sketches. He said they were building a shared future, so it did not matter whose name appeared on the designs. His career grew. Her name disappeared. When she protested, he told her she was talented but not presentable enough to become the face of a brand. Then he proposed using a ring built around one of her mother's patterns. 6 months later, after securing an investment deal with Lila's portfolio, he ended the engagement. He took the clients. She kept the ring. Until rent was due. What did you do when he used your work? Theo asked. Nothing. Why? Because every contract had his name. The sketches were yours. Being right and being able to prove it are different things. Theo understood that better than she knew. He wanted to tell her who he was. Each Saturday, he came closer. Each Saturday, he found another reason to wait. He told himself he needed to confirm what he suspected about the engraving inside her ring. He sent photographs of it to Ashford and Rowe's archive director. 2 days later, she called him into a locked records room. The pattern matched 17 uncredited designs produced for Ashford and Rowe between 26 and 30 years earlier. The artisan's initials appeared only once. E.M. Elena Moreno. Lila's mother. Theo's company had built part of its reputation using Elena's work without naming her. The engagement ring Lila sold for rent was not merely beautiful. It was evidence. Theo should have told her immediately. Instead, he asked the archive director to verify every record. He wanted certainty. He also feared what would happen when Lila learned the quiet stranger who listened to her anger about powerful companies owned one of them. The truth came out before he was ready. Ashford and Rowe hosted an exhibition called The Hands Behind the House, intended to celebrate forgotten craftspeople from its early years. Theo had created the project to correct the company's history. Lila received an invitation from a museum curator who had seen her restoration work at the market. She almost refused. Then she saw her mother's name printed on the guest list. Elena Moreno, archival engraver, attribution under review. Lila arrived at the museum wearing a black dress she had owned for 7 years and her mother's old engraving tool on a chain around her neck. She searched the displays until she found a glass case containing sketches she recognized from childhood. Tiny leaves. Broken stars. Curved lines her mother used to draw while talking on the phone. Beside them sat the engagement ring. The ring Lila had sold. Her breath stopped. A crowd gathered near the central staircase. The museum director stepped toward the microphone. Tonight, we welcome the man responsible for reopening the Ashford archives and confronting the company's hidden history, our chairman and owner, Theo Ashford. Theo descended the staircase. Lila felt the room tilt. He saw her immediately. The applause continued, but neither of them moved. When the presentation ended, Lila waited beside the glass case. Theo approached alone. You bought my ring because you recognized the design. I suspected it. And you knew my mother worked for your company. I confirmed it later. How much later? 3 weeks after we met. Lila stared at him. They had shared coffee. Stories. Arguments. He had listened while she described what it felt like to have powerful men use her work and control information. All while he withheld the most important information of all. You let me believe you were a collector. I never said that. The instant the words left his mouth, he regretted them. Lila's expression hardened. That is exactly what Caleb used to say. He never technically lied. He just arranged the truth so I could not see it. I was trying to verify the records before I told you. You were deciding when I was allowed to know my own family history. No. I was afraid you would think I bought the ring to protect the company. Did you? I bought it because the engraving was extraordinary. But you kept it because it was evidence. Yes. She looked at the ring behind glass. Did you ever intend to ask my permission before displaying it? Theo had approved the exhibition list. He had assumed she would be proud. He had not asked. No, he admitted. Lila nodded. At least that answer was honest. She removed the museum badge from her dress and placed it in his hand. My mother spent her career invisible inside your company. I will not become another story Ashford and Rowe tells to make itself look better. She walked away. Theo did not follow. The exhibition received glowing reviews. He hated every one of them. The board praised him for turning an old scandal into positive publicity. A marketing executive suggested creating a collection inspired by Elena Moreno's designs. Theo ended the meeting. Then he cancelled the collection. He ordered every disputed piece removed from sale until the company could identify the original makers and negotiate with their families. The decision cost Ashford and Rowe a major licensing agreement. Several board members threatened to remove him as chairman. Theo accepted the risk. But he did not contact Lila. An apology was necessary. Access to her was not. Lila spent the next month inside her apartment workshop, going through boxes that had belonged to her mother. She found old invoices, rejected contracts and letters from Ashford and Rowe promising exposure instead of payment. She also found 34 original design sheets. One of them carried the leaf and star pattern from her engagement ring. At the bottom, in Elena's handwriting, were the words, "A maker should always leave one mark that cannot be erased." Lila cried for the first time since selling the ring. Then she stopped crying and began organizing evidence. Caleb Ross was preparing to launch his first major collection. The centerpiece used the same leaf and star pattern. He had taken it from Lila's sketchbook years earlier. This time, she did not remain silent. She contacted the design council overseeing his launch and submitted her mother's original drawings, dated photographs of her own work and course records showing when she had recreated the pattern. Caleb called her within an hour. "You are going to destroy both of us," he said. "No. I am correcting the name beneath the design." "You sold the ring. You abandoned the work." "I sold an object. I did not sell authorship." "You cannot fight my investors." "I am not fighting your investors." She looked at her mother's engraving tool on the desk. "I am speaking for myself." The design council scheduled a public review. Caleb arrived with attorneys. Lila arrived with documents and a former instructor who remembered watching her engrave the ring. Theo attended, but he sat in the last row. He had provided the council with Ashford and Rowe's archive records, then removed himself from every decision. When Caleb's attorney argued that the pattern was too common to belong to one artist, Lila placed her mother's original metal stamp beneath a magnifying camera. The tiny leaves contained one deliberate flaw. Every fifth leaf leaned in the opposite direction. It was Elena's hidden maker's mark. The same mark appeared in Ashford's historic pieces. The same mark appeared inside Lila's ring. And the same mark appeared across Caleb's new collection. The council ruled that Caleb had misrepresented the design's origin. His launch was suspended. Lila did not celebrate. She simply asked that every future use credit Elena Moreno and that compensation owed to her mother's estate fund apprenticeships for independent craftspeople. She had not needed Theo to rescue her. She had needed the records he finally released without controlling what she did with them. 2 days after the hearing, Theo received a message. Saturday. Noon. My market table. He arrived early. Lila was arranging engraved bookmarks as if no months had passed. The gray ring box sat between them. "The museum returned it," Theo said. "You asked them to. It should never have been displayed without your permission." She opened the box. The ring looked smaller than she remembered. "Do you want it back?" he asked. "No." Theo tried not to show disappointment. Lila lifted the ring between 2 fingers. "I want to change what it means." "How?" She placed her mother's drawings on the table. "I am opening a cooperative workshop. 6 benches. Shared tools. Affordable rent. Every maker signs their own work." "That sounds expensive." "It is. I could." "No." He stopped. Lila's mouth curved slightly. "I received a City Arts grant. The Design Council added the compensation fund. I do not need you to buy the workshop. I was going to offer to carry boxes. That, I might accept." She looked at the ring again. "I want to remove the diamond and sell it. The money will pay the first apprentice's rent for 3 months." "And the gold?" I want to melt it into maker's stamps. Theo stared at her. One ring will not make 6. No. But it will make the first. She met his eyes. I sold it once because I was afraid of losing my home. This time, I wanted to help someone else keep theirs. Theo nodded. What do you need from me? Nothing hidden. It was not forgiveness. But it was a door. Over the following months, Theo helped only when invited. He carried workbenches. He repaired a leaking sink badly enough that Lila made him hire a plumber. He attended her cooperative meetings but never sat at the head of the table. Lila visited Ashford and Rowe's archive and helped identify 12 additional craftspeople. She insisted on contracts carrying every maker's name. Theo agreed publicly, even when the board protested that customers cared about brands, not artisans. Then we will teach them to care, he said. Trust returned slowly. Not through expensive gifts. Through information offered before it was requested. Through apologies that did not demand immediate forgiveness. Through Theo asking, "Do you want help?" instead of deciding she needed it. Through Lila learning that accepting support did not erase her independence. The first apprentice at Moreno Makers Cooperative was a 20-year-old woman named Ivy who had been sleeping in her car while studying metalwork. On opening day, Lila handed her a small steel stamp made partly from the gold of the engagement ring. The stamp carried Ivy's initials. Every piece, Lila told her. Even the practice ones. Ivy pressed the mark into a scrap of silver. 3 small letters appeared. She smiled as if someone had returned her name. Theo stood near the door, watching quietly. Later, after everyone left, Lila found him sweeping metal dust from the floor. "You own an international jewelry company," she said. "I am aware. And you are sweeping my workshop. You said every person cleans their own station. This is not your station." Theo leaned on the broom. "I was hoping it might become one." Lila looked at him. "Are you asking for a workbench?" No. For once, he did not hide behind careful language. "I am asking whether there is room in your life for me to stay." The old engagement ring was gone. Its diamond had paid Ivy's rent. Its gold had become a maker's mark. There was nothing left for Lila to return and nothing left for Theo to give back. That was why the moment felt honest. "I am still angry about the museum," she said. "I know. You waited too long to tell me the truth." "I know. You cannot keep agreeing with everything I say." "I disagree with that." She laughed. Theo stepped closer. "I cannot promise I will never become too careful again. But I can promise I will not call silence protection when it is really fear." Lila touched the engraving tool hanging from her neck. "My mother wrote that a maker should leave one mark that cannot be erased." "What mark do you want to leave?" She looked around the workshop, the 6 benches, the sign pieces, the lights reflected in newly cleaned windows. "This." Then she looked back at him. "And maybe something I have not designed yet." Theo's smile was quiet. "May I kiss you?" It was such a simple question. But it contained everything the other men in her life had failed to offer. Choice. "Yes," she said. He kissed her beside the first workbench, beneath a wall where every craftsperson's name had been written in black paint. A year later, Ashford and Rowe opened a permanent exhibition honoring the artisans who had built the company. The largest display belonged to Elena Moreno. Her sketches appeared under her own name. Beside them was an empty gray ring box. The label beneath it read, "The piece once held here was transformed into the first maker's stamp at Moreno Makers Cooperative." Lila stood before the case with Theo beside her. "You bought an engagement ring and ended up with an empty box," she said. "I made a questionable investment. Do you regret it?" Theo looked through the museum window toward the workshop across the street, where Ivy was teaching a new apprentice how to sign her first piece. "No." Lila slipped her hand into his. "Good." The following morning, Theo arrived at the cooperative carrying coffee and a small paper bag. Lila raised an eyebrow. "What did you buy?" "A silver band." Her expression changed. Theo quickly placed it on the table. "Not an engagement ring." "Then what is it?" A lesson. He opened the bag. Inside was a plain unfinished circle of silver. No stone, he said. No hidden design. No decision already made. Lila picked it up. What do you want me to do with it? Whatever you choose. She carried it to her bench. Then she engraved 2 tiny marks inside. Her initials. And his. Not a promise of marriage. Not yet. Only proof that this time, both names belonged inside the story. She handed it back. Theo examined the engraving. How much do I owe you? Lila smiled. You cannot afford me. He laughed, and the sound filled the workshop. Once, she had sold a ring because she believed losing it was the only way to keep a roof over her head. Now she stood inside a studio bearing her family's name, surrounded by artists who signed their own work, while the stranger who had bought that ring waited beside her without trying to own the future. The ring had not saved her. The billionaire had not saved her. But the sale forced open a door she had been too afraid to touch. And when Lila finally walked through it, she did so carrying nothing that belonged to her old life. Only her tools. Her name. And a love that knew the difference between recognizing her value and deciding it for her. Subscribe for more emotional romance stories with unforgettable endings.